Hey guys! The gestational period for an elephant is over 2 years long. Interesting facts by Brett Eddy. Hey guys, welcome to Community Groups. It's been a long time since we've been together. We were in Studio 3 a couple weeks ago, then we celebrated Easter this past weekend. So let me catch you up with where we were a couple weeks ago when we launched this series called Branded. So basically, every organization or group of people, whether it's a company or a school, any group, they have something that they're known for. Whether they try to be known for that or not, most organizations are known for something. And it really basically means they're branded. Like, for example, Starbucks. If you think about Starbucks, more often than not, you're going to think, okay, good coffee or maybe burnt coffee. But they are known for something. Like for me, Starbucks is known for whether I think the coffee is good or not. It's known as a place where I can go and I can hang out with friends, or I can have a meeting, or I can sit down with headphones and get work done in a pretty good environment to do all of those things. That's kind of their brand. It's what they sell. With Apple products, whether you're a fan of Apple or not, Apple is kind of known for cutting edge technology that's actually easy to use. Like my kids, as young as they are, can pick up an iPhone or an iPad and pretty much make it do what they want because their stuff is really easy to use and it all integrates. And that's kind of their brand. It's what they're known for. It's what they want you to think of when they think of Apple. Or another one maybe is Disney. Disney, when you approach Disney, anything Disney, whether it's a amusement park or one of their movies, you expect magic. Do you expect something magical to happen when you experience the brand of Disney? I had this experience a number of years ago. We had our daughter when she turned 4. We took her to the Magic Kingdom, and it was actually on her birthday. So you go, you get the little tag, and it says your happy birthday tag, and you write your name on it, and so everybody in the park knows it's your birthday. Well, we were on the way out of the park, and we're walking through a hotel, and at the concierge desk, one of the concierges calls us over and says, "Hey, Anna, come here." And he has Anna come over to the desk and he says, "Hey, I've got somebody on the phone for you." And she picks up the phone and it's Mickey Mouse wishing her a happy birthday. And to Anna, that was magical. And that's kind of what they're known for. Now, as an adult, I know that there was obviously a code that concierge typed in and they have like a pre-recorded message. But to my daughter, and even to us as parents, seeing her experience that was magical, and that is what Disney is known for. Maybe those brands don't resonate with you, so maybe you could take a second to think of what's a brand. Maybe it's a clothing brand or a shoe brand or a technology brand, or maybe for girls it's a brand of makeup that you kind of expect good things for when you interact with it. Well, your good expectations are based on something, aren't they? Like our expectations of a good brand are based on our experience with the brand or someone else's experience with the brand. If you have a good experience with a brand, you're more likely to continue to interact, to continue to spend money, to continue to use that certain company's product because of your experience. That's also why word of mouth is huge to companies and to their brand, because I may check out a organization or a company based on a friend of mine and their experience that they had with an organization. For example, LifeProof. I had a LifeProof case for one of my phones once, and when it started breaking apart, I contacted the company and they sent me a brand new case. No questions asked. I mean, I was totally loyal to LifeProof because of a positive experience I had with that company. The opposite's true of an experience I had with Denny's, and my kids feel the same way. I was with my kids at a Denny's and the service was terrible. The guy came up and asked us if we wanted to have dessert before he had even taken our orders for dinner. It was terrible, and to this day, my kids will not go to a Denny's because of that. So a brand of an organization is important because it's based on our experience with that brand. So here's the tension for us as it comes to Ripple Effect and Port City Community Church. People in our community already have a perception of the brand of the church, fair or unfair. Whether it's something that we as a church or the church as a whole has earned or not, people in our community that don't know our church or don't have a relationship with Jesus already have a perception of the church, already have a perception of what it looks like to be a Christian. Whether it's fair or not, whether we earned it as a church or not, it has everything to do with people's past past interactions with the church. Maybe your friends fall into this category. Maybe for them, they grew up maybe going to a church where church was just boring. And because of their interaction and their experience with church, they just associate that with church in general, that church is boring. Or maybe it's just not relevant. They went to a place where it didn't connect the truth of the gospel to their lives, and therefore they believe that church is just not relevant to them. Maybe because of a past experience, one of your friends or a family member feels as though the church is a place where people get hurt because their past experience with a church is one where they were hurt emotionally, they were hurt spiritually, maybe even hurt physically at a church. And that's why past experiences are huge, because it's it's what shapes our brands and our perception, especially when it comes to church. Maybe for you, you've got friends who their expectation and the brand of the church is a place of judgment because that's all they've ever experienced when it comes to church. And if we want to do anything in our community, if we want to make an impact for the gospel, if we want Ripple Effect to be something that is effective at reaching your friends' lives, then we have to do something to overcome the perception of Christians being self-absorbed or unaccepting of those who are not like us. So what does it look like for us to start to begin to change the perception? Well, how do we go about changing the way that people see and perceive the church? Those who are not a part of the church, maybe those who don't have a faith with Christ, maybe the people who are Christians, but they just will never associate with a church because of the experiences they had. How do we change that? The way I want to talk about it tonight is to look at an experience that Jesus had with a man named Zacchaeus. Now, most of you probably are really familiar with this story. If you've been in church at all, you probably know the story. If you went to a certain type of church as a little kid, you probably learned a song about Zacchaeus. But what's interesting is if you look at the story as maybe a grown-up or maybe someone who's a little bit more advanced than a child, it really reveals a lot about how we as a church can change the perception of faith in our community. It's from Luke chapter 19, and it describes it as says, Jesus and entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector who was wealthy. What you have to understand about Zacchaeus was he was wealthy because he was a tax collector. Tax collectors were the most hated people in Israel. And here's what you need to know about tax collectors. They were collecting money from Israelites to give to a nation that had conquered them. Rome was in control, and Rome collected taxes from the people that they had taken over. And so they hired Jewish people, they hired Israelites to take taxes from fellow Israelites, but they also gave them the ability to collect as much tax as they wanted. It's almost as if like the US was taken over by Canada, which would never happen. It couldn't happen, but let's just assume it did. And they took over us and they kind of overcame America, and they started hiring Americans to take money from other Americans to give to Canada. How would you feel about people that became tax collectors? Well, they'd be like turncoats. They'd be people who had become Benedict Arnolds to our country, and we'd hate them. And that's how the people felt about Zacchaeus. He was hated. He was lower than the low. They actually had a separate category for tax collectors. They had sinners over here, and then they had lower than sinners. They had tax collectors. And he was wealthy because he was stealing money from his own countrymen. And he says he was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but being a short man, he could not because of the crowd. So Jesus had a reputation. He had a reputation of being someone who did miracles, who healed people, and Zacchaeus had heard of him and wanted to see who this Jesus really was. So it says he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore. And what you need to know about the culture, the Jewish culture, and especially in that time, in ancient Jewish culture, to run was like, for a man, it was something that just a man wouldn't do. It was something that children would do. And so there was something childlike in Zacchaeus' response. When he heard that Jesus was coming, he was going to let go of all pretense, let go of all inhibitions, and he was going to do everything he could to see Jesus. And he said he ran up into a sycamore tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, he's gone to be the guest of a sinner. So they're talking bad about Jesus because he's associating with someone that they feel is not worthy of being associated with. They look down on him. And because of Jesus' compassion, because of his kindness, because of his willingness to engage him in conversation and invite into a relationship with him by going to eat a meal with him, which was the highest sign of acceptance in that culture, Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Zacchaeus responded to the gospel. He responded to Jesus because the brand of Jesus was one of love and acceptance, regardless of what culture said about Zacchaeus, regardless of how everybody else treated Zacchaeus. Jesus' message was one of love, and that's what drew Zacchaeus to him. And because of the way that Jesus treated him, Zacchaeus changed his whole life. Jesus didn't even have to tell him, "Hey, you're a sinner. You need to go give your stuff back to everybody." It was simply out of the response that Zacchaeus had to the love that he felt from Jesus that caused him to change. One way that we change the way that we as a church are perceived is how we treat people. And in particular, how do we go about treating people that are different from us? If we want to change the brand of our church, if we want to change the brand of Ripple Effect in our community, we've got to change the way that we treat people who are outside of our circles, the way that we treat people who aren't like us. So I want you to think, how do we treat the people that don't fit in our social circles? How do you treat people that don't necessarily fit with you socially? How do we treat people who are new to our small groups, or new to your friend group, or new to your community group? I mean, you're sitting in a group, in a home, and there are probably hundreds of middle schoolers, hundreds of high schoolers that would be dying to be a part of a community like you're a part of right now. How do you treat people that are kind of outside that community when they come in for the first time? How do we treat people that most others shun? I'm guessing in your schools, there are people that are just kind of shunned by everybody. Nobody really talks to them. Nobody engages them. They're kind of just on the outside of every single social circle. How do you, as a representative of the brand of Jesus, of the brand of Port City Community Church, of the church as a whole, how do you treat people who are often shunned by others? And lastly, how do we treat people that Christians look down on? There are certainly groups and types of people that Christians look down on, or maybe you feel that because you're a Christian, you should look down on them and treat them differently. What would it look like for us to have a group of high schoolers who made the commitment to say, I'm going to treat everybody as though they're a human being created by God? When we begin to treat the people who aren't like us the way that Jesus treated them, we begin to create a culture that is irresistible to people who are outside of faith in Christ. And when we start doing that, we're going to start changing the brand of our faith and of Ripple Effect.